It being 5:30 over the clock, I will call this regular council meeting of the town of Fort Frances to order, it being session number 65. And before we do our territorial acknowledgement, I'd like to welcome our newest councillor, Bill Morrison. Wonderful to have you with us, and your shiny new name tag there. So let's begin with the territorial announcement. In the spirit of reconciliation, the town of Fort Frances acknowledges with respect that it is situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Métis people of Treaty 3. We give gratitude and honor to the ancestors, elders, and all Anishinaabe and Métis people for sharing their resources and knowledge with us. Item number 3, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest, and if so, state the general nature thereof? Seeing none, moving on. Delegations and deputations, we do have one. We have Mr. Michael Willick. Welcome, Mr. Willick.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come in here again tonight and present at this meeting. The forest industry in Ontario has faced some really difficult times, is facing some really difficult times. You hear it every time you turn on the television or the radio. We're dealing with duties that our U.S. friends are putting on our softwood lumber. You're hearing about more and more pulp mill closures across the province. And this is resulting in an oversupply of wood chips that is causing a lot of grief for the sawmills. But I'd like tonight to talk about a few of the positive developments that have evolved in this district over the last 6 years. Tonight I'm going to describe what I see as a vision by the Rainy River Future Development Corporation that has placed the Fort Frances district in a relatively favorable position. I'm going to point to 3 key directions that Rainy River Future Development Corporation took over the last while that are now producing results. First of all, it began when the mill closed. When the pulp mill closed, there was a need to revisit who holds the sustainable forest. The second thing that went on is that this change in tenure facilitated the delivery of exceptional forest management services, sustainable forest management services on the forest in the surrounding area. And thirdly, over great announcement that biofuel is moving to the town. These are all linked together. First, the forest license transfer. Despite the hardship and the pain that came with the pulp mill closure, the Rainy River Future Development Corporation saw some hope. There was an opportunity to play a role in the transfer of the license from the Resolute Forest Products into what is now a locally held corporation. So the Rainy River Rainy River Future Development Corporation took a very active role in the creation of the forest management company, which is known as Boundary Waters Forest Management Corporation. Rainy River Future Development Corporation engaged me to be their representative to represent their interest in the development of this corporation, their interest and, in fact, the interest of the town of Fort Frances. I was able to assume some of a leadership role in that group. In fact, became the president for 4 years. Now, as a quick recap for some of you that don't know about the Boundary Waters Forest Management Corporation, it was a company that was established specifically to manage the Boundary Water Forest. That's the forest that goes from Rainy River over to the other side of Atikokan, halfway up to Dryden, big forest. There are 16 shareholders that represent the mills, the logging contractors, the Aboriginal communities, and the district economic development agencies, Atikokan Economic Development Agency, Rainy River Future Development Corporation. This group came together and negotiated with the government to bring on the sustainable forest license and be held by that company. So this forest tenure arrangement provides for local decision making. That's a critical point. Keep in mind, this is a corporation that's owned and managed by local interests. No longer are the key decisions taken by a corporate office in the city. These decisions are made by the board of directors right here in Fort Francis. Significant delegation of authority from the province. Waters Forest Management holds the sustainable forest license. We have the rights to the timber, subject to the commitments that the minister made in the past. That was put in place when the license was given to us. But the final thing is, we can, any surplus fiber, we can make agreements with people that want to come in and invest that use that. So if we follow the rules, we have the autonomy pretty much to do what is best, to do in the forest what is best for the area. This Boundary Waters Forest Management model is proving to be very successful. The mills and contractors have certainty about where they're going to go, how much they're going to cut, where they're going to be from year to year. They can make, based on this, they can make the investment decisions because there's certainty. They can make they're involved in the decision-making process. They're involved and it's transparent. They're right there. Disputes in the past ended up in the Ministry of Natural Resources offices, and it was rather, the government bureaucracy took over, and it took a long time to resolve it, to resolve disputes. We don't have those disputes anymore. They're all solved at the board table. So the local board, and the staff make decisions locally that benefit the forest, the local economy, and the shareholders. Now, the local economy benefits from the expenditure of about $8 million on this forest, on the road program and the management of the forest. In addition to that, the logging and hauling of the products to the mills generates another $40 million in business from the forest. Now, I'm not talking about the revenue that's generated by the mills. I'm talking about what is generated by the forest. So it's about $48 million. So it's pretty significant. Second thing, delivering exceptional forest management. Providing sustainable forest management is critical for the future of the forest and the communities that depend on these forests. Rainy River Future Development Corporation has played a significant role in supporting and guiding the Boundary Waters Forest Management Corporation as they designed an excellent management structure. We should be proud of the sustainable forest management practices that are delivered on our forest. And this is demonstrated by repeated audits that we have by an international auditing body, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. It's a worldwide group that determines whether your forests are managed sustainable. We get glowing reports each time they come and do an audit. Demonstrating the sustainability is important. Predictability and certainty about wood supply, critical factors for the contractors, the mills, the workers, and the communities. Sustainably managed forests provide benefits to the local people, their health and their lifestyles. And products from certified forests have a better access to international markets. The third point I want to make is about the new investment. Early on, Rainy River Future Development Corporation recognized that there would be an opportunity that was going to flow from the closure of the Fort Francis pulp mill. Well, the bulk of the annual available wood supply was committed by the Minister of Natural Resources decades ago. Their Rainy River Future Development Corporation wanted to know what available fiber could be offered to entice local investment. The Rainy River Future Development Corporation saw a need and arranged for a project to identify the available fiber from the forest that could be used to attract new industry. A consortium of Rainy River Future Development Corporation, the Atikokan Economic Development Corporation, Boundary Waters, commissioned a study, paid for the work, and shared the results. This report identified that there was underutilized red and white pine on the forest. As a matter of interest, that the existing mills have upped their production to use that volume. The report identified a volume of cedar that was not used. And so there's a small niche operation that's set up to provide saws, cedar lumber, and shavings. And the third thing was a significant volume of unmerchantable fiber was identified. Tops, limbs, crooked pieces, pulpwood type material that has no home now. So this volume, it was 900,000 cubic meters identified across the forest, but 300,000 cubic meters was identified close in to Fort Frances, like within 125 kilometers. So when Rainy River Future Development Corporation saw this opportunity, they prepared a package that would outline the attributes of locating here in Fort Frances. They systematically identified and contacted firms across North America that were into the green energy business. Through that outreach, they successfully engaged Highbury Energy of Vancouver in discussions about the opportunity. They had Highbury come to Fort Frances and visit, where they pitched the opportunity here in Fort Frances in some detail. At that point, Rainy River Future Development Corporation then provided advice and introductions to Highbury around the district to key players, including our mayor. Highbury decided that Fort Frances provides an excellent investment opportunity, and as you know, last week they announced their partnership with the local First Nations to build a biofuel plant on 8th Street. So, in closing, because this work took so long, we're talking about 6 years, and it was behind the scenes, this vision and commitment has brought economic development from the forest industry to Fort Frances. This could be overlooked easily by many people. However, Rainy River Future Development Corporation methodically supported and in some cases led the creation of the company to hold a sustainable forest license. They pressed to ensure that there was the highest standards were met in delivering of forest management services. They identified a business opportunity, and then they attracted an investor. As you know, WBCEC recently announced their intention to build in Fort Frances. I think this is a good news story worthy of telling.
Thank you for an excellent presentation, Mr. Willick. I'm going to ask my council if they would like to ask any questions or have any comments. Councillors, any questions or comments? Many thanks to you and the Rainy River District Future Development Corporation for your innovative work on this project. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to correspondence. We have a fair amount of correspondence. Item 6.1 deals with the new Rainy River District West OPP Detachment Board budget. Before I open this to councilors, I'll just make a couple of comments. The budget for the detachment board, this is a brand new budget, is $21,658.72. There was considerable discussion at the meeting as to how the various municipalities would divide up the budget and pay their share. The board decided that the share would be based on population using the 2021 stats. And Fort Frances has 56.875% of the population of the Rainy River District, which means our share of the budget is $12,318.43, which I'll point out is less than the budget we had for the former Police Services Board. So with that, do any councillors want to make a comment? Councillor Mackey?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification, you had suggested that we're 50-some% of the district, but we're 56% of the area that this board is governing, which does not include Atikokan. I'm asking.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I noticed on the budget that it said remuneration for 3 members. I'm assuming that's the provincial appointee and the 2 community reps was $6,000, or that's $2,000 each. I'm just curious, how many meetings would you meet per year? Is it quarterly? Is it more than that? Because that becomes $500 a month, a meeting if it's quarterly. And I'm just wondering if that's how they came up with that figure to basically be $500 a meeting. I'm just curious if.
So I believe it is quarterly. Other meetings, of course, can be held as called. I don't know the reasoning behind that exact figure. That's what the board decided upon after some discussion and based on prior practice with the previous police services board. The previous police services board paid members of that board $1,800 per year. So that was the past practice, allowing for inflation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Brunetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very happy to hear that it is less than the previous board. Just wondering, I know this is like your first year budget. Do you foresee any major changes, or is there anything that you weren't really sure on when you were working on the budget that may come back next year?
I think it's a fairly reasonable budget. What we decided on was we had as you would expect, a considerable discussion on this. And then we decided that we'll try it for a year and then look at it at the end of the year. Councillor McTaggart, by the way, who I really want to give a big shout out to, is instrumental in doing a phenomenal amount of work in bringing the district together, because there was some pushback from the district on various aspects of this. This is brand new to them. And it was Councillor McTaggart that got everybody together. I don't know, Councillor McTaggart, if you wanted to comment on this at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes. And I have to say that it was administration did a tremendous amount of work in bringing everything together also. It was a bit of a, it's new to all the municipalities west of town. They were former 5.1 communities that never had any representation for police services in the past. And under the new CSPA 2019, they're mandated to be a part of the police services board. And so it is now part of the detachment board. We went through the entire budget. I expect there may be a tiny change in this budget going forward. I'm hearing that there may be a reconsideration motion coming to our next meeting, but I don't think it's going to change it a tremendous amount. But I believe that we've covered off all the things that were basically in the Fort Frances Police Services Board. The OAPSB membership is a little different. It's charged on a per property basis, and that's across all the properties in the district, Fort Frances West. And I think that we also previously were covered under the municipality for insurance purposes, and so this detachment board needed to secure independent insurance, and it came in at $3,888, which was bought through a consortium of police service boards across the province, OPP detachment boards across the province. So that was a new item. And I believe everything else is pretty much straightforward as is presented, and I think as the mayor has previously described too.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart. Any other questions or comments, councillors? If there are none, I'm going to put an oral motion on the floor that council support the proposed Rainy River West OPP Detachment Board 2025 budget. Could I get a mover and seconder on that, please? Councillor Mackey and Councillor McTaggart. Any further discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Okay, the next item of correspondence is the revised annual billing statement from the Ontario Provincial Police. One thing I do want to comment on for councillors is I know that everyone is very interested in this, especially with the amount of money that we are paying out as a municipality. There are two webinars being hosted by the OPP next week, one on January 15 and one on January 17th. January 15th one is at 2 p.m. and the January 17th one is at 9 a.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time, by the way. So if you want some further information on this, you can attend those webinars. The one thing that leapt out at me when I was looking at the invoice that they sent was that across the province, if you look at our calls for service, because we pay a flat rate, the same flat rate that everybody else pays across the province, but then there are add-ons, and the big add-on is the calls for service. And we have a large number of calls for service for the size of our population, and the calls for service for Fort Frances are roughly 1% of the entire cost of the calls for service of the whole province, which strikes me as phenomenal. A little community of around 7,500 people is amounting to 1% of the calls for service across the province, which tells me that the funding formula that they're presently using, it's not sustainable by small northern rural communities. It's certainly not sustainable by us, and that funding formula has to be looked at and has to be changed. And we will be speaking to the minister or the minister's representation at the Roma conference this upcoming week when we go. So I just want to again throw that open to councillors for any comments. Any comments, councillors? Oh, Councillor McTaggart.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to give you some perspective on this, there's at least 280 municipalities that are billed across the province by the OPP for this service, so that almost 1% of 280 municipalities. It's quite a stark number. And if you read further into the document, I believe it's on the second page, the theory for the billing is proposed at base rate at 50.7% and calls for service at 49.3% of the total bill. And our rough numbers are something like 27% for base service and 73% for calls for service. So we're way out of whack in it. I certainly support the mayor's comment on the sustainability of the cost of policing in Fort Frances, and certainly hope that we get an audience with the Solicitor General to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart. Councillor Brunetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really think that it's critical that even if we don't get a delegation at Roma, we bring this time and time again to the minister or the Solicitor General, because I mean, yes, they've given us a reprieve for this year, you know, with the $500,000, but it's going to be back next year. It's not going away. So we need some way to mitigate that, those issues, because it is just not sustainable for our community. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brunetta. And I do want to reiterate what Councillor Brunetta said. We were fortunate in getting a one-time reduction for this year only. So that tells me that the Solicitor General's ministry is aware that there is a problem. And as Councillor Brunetta said, we have to be relentless in our pursuit of getting the funding formula changed. Now, we have been doing that. We have been speaking to the Solicitor General's office. We have attended seminars where they actually are looking at the funding formula and perhaps changing it. So we'll continue to do that, and we will continue to lobby the Solicitor General as well as our local MPP. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, moving on to the next one. Item 6.3 is the Fort Frances Sports Hall of Fame sponsorship request. I just want to make a comment. We have supported this in the past. I'd like to see us support this with a bronze membership at $500. One of the reasons I like to support it is the quality, as always, of the nominees. And in particular, this year we have one of our own, a former councillor, Councillor Wiedenhoff, who sat on council for 4 terms, being nominated. So I would like to put an oral motion on the floor that council support the 2025 Fort Francis Sports Hall of Fame with a bronze sponsorship donating an amount of $500 from the council PR budget. And in order to discuss that, I need a mover and seconder. So Councillor Behan, Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion on this or further comment? Councillor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I do agree as well that we should continue with our bronze sponsorship. Given the range was $500 to $999, I wasn't sure what we had given in the past. It seems to be it was $500. I'd even be willing to up that to even the full $999, especially given the fact this is every 3 years. It's not annual. So that works out to $333 a year. So I'd be even willing to go to the full amount of $999 because I do think it is an important event to showcase all our athletes that have brought great fame and recognition to our community over the years. And so I'd be willing to do that. Now, maybe that's something we have to wait for the budget, but I'm still thinking that I'd be willing to even up it beyond $500, but still keep within the bronze range. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll just go to our treasurer before I go for further discussion to see if council wills it, if we could afford $999.
Thank you, through you. Currently, right now in the budget, which you haven't seen yet, and I apologize, we have $14,000 for council public relations. So if that's the will of council, it is affordable.
Okay, so I'll deal with that in a moment. I just want to give everyone a chance to speak. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Mackey?
I'm in support of Councillor Behan's thoughts there, as I'm a lucky recipient of the honor of being inducted, so I think it's certainly a worthy thing to support.
Thank you for that. Further comments? So am I hearing a willingness to go to 999? I'm getting nods. So I'll have to amend that motion. So I need a mover and seconder to amend the motion to say that the amount will be $999. Could I get a mover and second? That Councillor Firth, I was going to say Councillor Caleb. Councillor Firth and Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion on the amendment? Calling the question on the amendment.
If I may, just a thought. Why wouldn't you add another $1 and then you're in the silver?
Oh, what an excellent idea.
And you have a bigger ad.
Councillor Behan, are you okay if we go to one?
Yes, for $1 more, I think you get that much more for silver sponsorship. So yeah, I'd be definitely in favor of that. Thank you.
Okay, mover and seconder of the amendment. Or are you okay if the amendment reads 1,000 instead of 999? So they're fine with that. Thank you very much for that, Madam Treasurer. You're astute as always. Any further discussion on the amendment? Calling the question on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? That's carried. So the main motion now reads that council support the 2025 Fort Francis Sports Hall of Fame with a silver sponsorship, donating an amount of $1,000 from the council PR budget. Any discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Thank you for that, Council. Item 6.4 of correspondence is the 2025 public health levy from the Northwestern Health Unit. The levy is for a total of $455,700, which is up by 1% over last year. So it's up an amount of $4,512. I do want to thank the Northwestern Health Unit for being very careful with the funding of the municipalities, and that's greatly appreciated by us. Councillors, any questions or comments on that? Councillor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I think my question is related to this, but my question is, does anyone know the population of Fort Francis? Because you look at the health unit budget, they listed at 6,082, which they call as per the most recent enumeration in 2022 conducted under Section 15 of the Assessment Act. On Saturday, the RDMA received their levy notice from NOMA, which and our population there was listed as 6,349 as per MPAC figures. I thought we were at 7,300 at least, and I didn't know we got below 7,000. So I'm just curious where these different figures come in, and do we actually have a number of what our population is? I think that's kind of important to know.
And just to add to that, when I'm talking about Fort Francis, I use the number 7,500. We'll look into that and get back to you, Councillor Bien.
It's one thing to be out by 50 people or so, but this is getting on to
Yeah.
1,000. So I think that's kind of
Yeah.
important to know. Thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you. Good point. Any other questions or comments on item 6.4? Yes. Councillor Morrison.
Through the mayor, I just want to say I was really impressed with the health unit, the cost savings they've reduced through efficiencies. I think they believe they said $780,000 they trimmed off their budget, just different efficiencies using, one printer instead of everybody having printers. But I thought it was pretty amazing that everybody else is going way up and they're able to do it in 1%.
Yeah, they're an excellent and an efficient organization, and we greatly appreciate what they do for our community. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 7, which is council reports. I'll kick it off. As always, I have a written report. I'm not going to read everything, but I just want to give a shout out to a few. Some of this is going back to before Christmas. I want to give a big shout out to Diane Maxey and her Christmas cantata. She and her choraleers every year practice for about a month and then put on a free Christmas concert for everybody. I attended this year, as I do every year, and it was absolutely outstanding and a great way to begin the holiday season. So shout out to Diane Maxey and her group. The other shout out I want to give is the Salvation Army. Again, every year the Salvation Army springs into action around Christmas time, putting out Christmas hampers. They invited me down to the East End Hall where they had volunteers and they were assembling the hampers, and it's something to see. And I recommend next year, if you get a chance, go have a look. The entire floor of the East End Hall was covered with these hampers, these boxes going out to community members who are less fortunate. So a big shout out to the Salvation Army for all they do to help out people in our community all year round, but particularly at Christmas. Another highlight of the past month, I was as part of the DSAB. The DSAB, by the way, changed their name to the Rainy River District Services Board, but I can't pronounce that, so I say DSAB. The DSAB was invited by Grand Council Treaty 3 to attend a housing conference in Winnipeg. So myself, I'm the vice chair, and the chair and the CAO attended. It was an excellent 2-day conference. It was a real working conference. There was a consultant there to guide us, but basically we spent most of the time divided up into small groups where we discussed housing. But for me, it was very different in that I was a very small minority in most groups. Most of the groups were made up of First Nation representatives and members. And it was really interesting and eye-opening for me to hear the First Nation members talk about the housing difficulties that they experience both on and off reserve. So that was a really good conference. The other thing that we've started to do, and I include our CAO in that as well, is we've been meeting with Chief Breer of Couchiching. Chief Breer and myself have gotten together for coffee a number of times, and we've decided that we really need to open up the lines of communication and have a dialogue going and discuss projects that we could work on together, because Couchiching, I mean, where does Fort Francis begin or end and Couchiching begin? And so many of the members of Couchiching are friends and relatives. So we've been meeting. We had a meeting with some of their council members, their CEO, and the chief. And we discussed the possibility of working together to extend the sidewalk from the overpass in Fort Francis down to Seven Gens and then on to Couchiching. So many people are walking on the road in inclement weather and in darkness that it's a real safety issue. And many people that attend Seven Gens live in Fort Francis. Many people that live on Couchiching walk back and forth between Fort Francis and Couchiching. So that seems like a worthwhile project. Another project that Kuchiching initiated was they would like to see us work with them on getting an overpass built on the reserve over the CN tracks. And we discussed some other issues as well. And yesterday, Chief Bureau called me and I went out and spoke with he and their CEO again and had another really productive conversation. So I'm really excited about that. Another shout out, I want to shout out to our local curling club. They held the Ontario Curling Association Junior Provincial Curling Championships here, and that's a big deal. The winner of that goes on to the Nationals, which is held in PEI in Summerside. And we had one of our teams competing in that, so a shout out to Team Tucker, consisting of Emma Tucker, Ali Chabot, Ali Sasiuk, Tia Wagner, and Molly Tucker. There were both men and women's teams competing, and they did an excellent job in organizing that. And so that brings a lot of visitors to our community, and they do this almost every year. They're hosting some sort of contest there. So thanks to them for that. Marcus Pulowski was in town, so I met with him last Monday. And again, I always hit up the major issues with him. The international bridge, I would really like to see the federal government buy out the current bridge owners and build a brand new bridge. That bridge is over 100 years old, and have a bridge without any tolls at all. So we discussed that. We have the ongoing situation with American fishing guides, bringing parties of Americans who are staying on the American side into Canadian waters, using Canadian resources but not contributing in any way to the Canadian economy. And this is hurting our guides, and it's hurting our fishing resorts as well. So we discussed that. The other thing that came up was MP and Pulowski mentioned that the federal government is reacting already to comments made by the American president-elect about border security, and they're very serious about seeing an increase in the number of RCMP along the border, including possibly having one station permanently here. That's something they're considering. I also had the pleasure of attending the meeting that Mr. Willick referred to at Seven Gens. As you know, the 10 First Nations have got together with a company called Highbury and formed a new company. This new company is 80% owned by the First Nations and led by the 10 First Nations. Highbury is providing the technical expertise and the process, and they want to build a biorefinery in Fort Frances. Now, this biorefinery, I think, is the perfect project for our times when we're worried about global warming and climate change, because what it does is it takes basically waste fiber from the forest and also from sawmills in the form of sawdust and chips, and it has there's a process by which it decarbonizes, takes the carbon out of that, and it turns it into fuel. The biorefinery can make a variety of fuels, but they plan on making jet fuel. There's a real demand for decarbonized jet fuel, so that could be a real economic boost in the arm. And we were well represented there. Our CAO was there, our operations and facility manager, Travis Robb, was there, and the CEO of the Fort Frances Power Corporation was also there. So that was a really well done meeting. The 10 chiefs were there. Highbury had brought their technical experts, and they explained the process clearly to everybody who was there. And then the last thing I want to comment on is the fact that January is Alzheimer's month, and so this is an insidious disease. It's the most common form of dementia, and we did a flag raising, and I issued a proclamation here recently proclaiming the month of January as National Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And again, I want to thank Councillor Bian Bernetta and the town staff for coming out and supporting that. And if anybody would like more information on Alzheimer's, you can go to their website. It's at alzheimers.ca/find. And with that, I'll go to Councillor Bernetta. Oh, sorry. And with that, I'll go to Councillor Bian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I first would like to report on the Rainy River District Municipal Association, which held its annual general meeting this past Saturday, January 11th, at the Fort Frances Legion, that I attended along with Mayor Halakis and Councillors Bernetta and Morrison. During the business portion of the meeting, delegates approved the audited financial statement for the period from January 1st to December 31st, 2024. Revenues for the year totaled $24,324.19 against expenditures of $25,350.96, which reflected a deficit of $1,026.77. The bank balance of $37,177.56 as of December 31st, 2024 includes $17,021 in the checking account, along with GICs of $5,000, $12,042.50, and $3,113.87 that mature in April of 2025, May of 2025, and March of 2026, respectively. Delegates also approved payment of the NOMA levy in the amount of $5,507.62, which represented a 1% increase over 2024. Elections also were held, which saw Dawson Reeve Doug Hartnell acclaimed for another 2-year term as RRDMA president. I was acclaimed for another term as RRDMA vice president, while our own Councillor Bernetta, along with EMO Councillor Lisa Teeple and Atikokan CAO Jason Young, were acclaimed as NOMA reps for another term. Atikokan Councillor Liz Shine was acclaimed as the RRDMA rep to sit in the Fort Frances and Area Human Trafficking Coalition, while EMO Councillor Phil Watley was re-elected as the RRDMA rep on the Physician Recruitment and Retention Committee. As well, delegates passed resolutions dealing with issues such as the paramedics shortage in our district and physician recruitment, which now will be forwarded to NOMA for consideration at its AGM in April. The rest of the meeting featured guest speakers from the District of Rainy River Services Board, the Northwestern Health Unit, the Rainy River Future Development Corporation, the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines, and the OPP. Other speakers included Dustin Cox of Lowry's, who spoke on cybersecurity, and Raven River First Nations Councillor Cassandra Kese-Samet, President of Ashugan Partnership Limited, who gave an update on the international bridge here. The next meeting of the RRDMA, of the executive of the RRDMA, is scheduled for Wednesday, April 16th at 6 p.m. at the Chapel Municipal Office, while the next general meeting is slated for Wednesday, May 21st at 7 p.m., with that venue still to be determined. Secondly, I attended a special budget meeting of the Fort Frances Public Library Board, which was held last Thursday at 4:15 p.m. in the Shaw Room, along with Mayor Halakis and CAO Michaels. The board finalized the budget for 2025, showing a deficit of roughly $638,000, which represents an increase of about 4% over 2024. I can say the board and the library CEO worked diligently to come up with a realistic budget for 2025, which was challenging considering revenues can be described as stagnant at best, while expenditures continue to rise, including many annual costs the board has no control over. The library board will hold its next regular monthly meeting this coming Thursday, January 16th, again starting at 4:15 p.m. in the Shaw Room. Finally, I attended the meeting of the Indigenous Relations Advisory Committee along with Mayor Halakis and Councillor Morrison, which was held last Wednesday at 10 a.m. in the committee room here at the Civic Center. I should note that Councillor Morrison attended the meeting as an observer, given his appointment to the committee is slated to be officially approved by Council later on at tonight's meeting. As Mayor Halakis noted in his written report, the committee reviewed its terms of reference and is recommending to Council an increase to its composition to also include a second youth member, a member of the public, and an elder, as well as to increase the frequency of meetings from quarterly to monthly. The committee also agreed on a mission statement, which reads, "The Indigenous Relations Advisory Committee is established to strengthen the relationship between the town of Fort Frances and Indigenous communities. The committee serves to guide the town on matters affecting Indigenous residents and to foster a spirit of reconciliation, respect, and inclusivity within the community. Committee's next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 26th at 10 a.m. in the committee room. And that concludes my verbal update for this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Behan. Councillor Bernetta has informed me she has no report. Councillor Morrison, I don't imagine you have a report, or do you? Oh, excellent.
Through the mayor. First of all, I just like to thank everybody for all their help. Acting Clerk Chelsea's been a huge help for me, and CAO Michaels, and thank you very much, you guys, and Jeremy as well. I've attended as Indigenous Relations as an observer, as Councillor Behan mentioned. And then this weekend, one of the things I found at the Rainy River District Municipal Association, just the DSAB challenges that they have. Staffing is their biggest concern. They have a lot of staff burnout, especially the paramedics. I believe they said they were about 30% short. I think that was about the number. They got 4 new paramedics coming from Southern Ontario. There's also an extreme shortage in early childhood educators. They need 25 to 30% more of them. They're also trying a new training program. They're also short in maintenance workers, which is a big issue because they have a lot of aging infrastructure. So they have a big, huge concern about that and just getting workers. And homelessness is a huge problem. They're trying homelessness prevention programs, building safe and stable housing before it begins to try to stop the problem. But there's a lot of mental health issues that are creating the homelessness issue. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. That brings us to item 8, which is the consent agenda. We have 7 items. So 8.2 is the regular council meeting minutes of December 9th, 2024, and the special council minutes of December 17th, 2024. And the recommendation reads that council approve the following minutes of council as presented. Regular council meeting December 9th, 2024, and special council meeting December 17th, 2024. 8.3, recommendation reads that the boards and committees meeting minutes be received as information. And those boards are the Fort Frances Public Library Board, meeting of November 21st, 2024, the Indigenous Relations Advisory Committee, meeting of August 28, 2024, the Rainy River District West OPP Detachment Board, meeting of October 21st, 2024, and the BIA December 10th, 2024 meeting. 8.4 is a resolution supporting the rehabilitation of the East End Hall. Recommendation reads that council receive report AR-24-0728 entitled Resolution of Support for the Rehabilitation of the East End Hall Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Grant Application, and that council acknowledges the total project cost has already been approved as dependent on funding a capital item in the 2025 Town of Fort Frances capital budget, and that council authorize and support an application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation Community Enhancement Program for the rehabilitation of the East End Hall and related works, and that the project cost will be attributed as follows. The Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, $56,250, and the municipal contribution will be $18,750, and any budget overages. Item 8.5, again, this resolution is in support of the Memorial Sports Center Improvement Project. Recommendation reads that council receive report AR-25-0730 entitled Resolution of Support for the Memorial Sports Center Improvement Project, a Northern Ontario Heritage Fund grant application, and the council acknowledge the total project cost has already been approved as a capital item in the 2025 Town of Fort Frances capital budget, and that council authorize and support an application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Community Corporation Enhancement Program for the Memorial Sports Center Improvement Project and related works, and that the project cost will be attributed as follows. The NOHFC, $168,000, and the municipal contribution will be $56,000, and any budget overages, for a total project cost of $224,000. Item 8.6, this is a resolution that Councillor Bernetta put on last meeting, and it's supporting the critical infrastructure. The resolution comes to the Town of Aurora, and the recommendation is the council support the Town of Aurora resolution for the redistribution of the provincial land tax and GST to Ontario municipalities for sustainable infrastructure funding. I might add that many municipalities are supporting this. 8.7, this is a request for a taxi meter rate increase, and the recommendation reads that council direct administration to investigate current taxi meter rate practices by taxi companies operating in the town of Fort Francis, and that administration review taxi meter rates and cost of living increase, and that administration prepare a report to council with investigations and taxi meter review, providing options for council consideration. And finally, 8.8, this is the new official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw. The recommendation reads that on December 9th, 2024, council provided approval of report AR-24-0720 and agreed with the recommendation of administration to approve proposed final drafts of the town of Fort Francis official plan and zoning bylaw. And the council resolved to adopt these documents through bylaw at a subsequent council meeting. And that council hereby considers this the second reading of, 1, the proposed final draft of the town of Fort Francis official plan and its attached schedules, and 2, the proposed final draft of the town of Fort Francis zoning bylaw and its attached schedules. And that council hereby adopt the final draft of the town of Fort Francis official plan through bylaw, and that mayor and clerk be authorized to adopt the town of Fort Francis zoning bylaw as at a subsequent council meeting. Council, would you like to pull any of those? Councillor Bien.
I'd like to pull item 8.8, please.
Any other ones? Okay. Over to you, Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I know this is not the most important thing in the world, given the complexity of these documents and the official plan and zoning bylaw. But I did notice again that the territorial acknowledgement that prefaces both documents have not been updated to reflect the new version that we recently passed by council. And I think it's important that we do that change before we officially pass everything. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for catching that, and we will see that that is changed. Anything else on that? Can I have a recommendation? The council approve the consent agenda as follows. Agenda items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, and 8.7. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Firth. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. No one is opposed. Going back then, I believe it was 8.8. 8.8, we will make the change that Councillor Bien caught. And again, the recommendation that on December 9th, 2024, Council provided approval report AR-24-0720 and agreed with the recommendation of administration to approve proposed final drafts of the Town of Fort Francis official plan and zoning bylaw. And the council resolved to adopt these documents through a bylaw at a subsequent council meeting. And the council hereby considers this the second reading of 1, the proposed final draft of the Town of Fort Francis official plan and its attached schedules, 2, the proposed final draft of the Town of Fort Francis zoning bylaw and its attached schedules. And the council hereby adopt the final draft of the Town of Fort Francis official plan through bylaw, and that mayor and clerk be authorized to adopt the Town of Fort Francis zoning bylaw at a subsequent council meeting. Any further discussion? All in favor? Yes, thank you. I do need to move in a second. That's not included in the, so Councillor Morrison and Councillor Mackey. And now any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried, and no one is opposed. Okay, that brings us to item 9. So 9.1, this is the Moffat Family Fund, always some good news. The recommendation is that council receive report AR-24-0729 outlining the 2025 Moffat Family Fund with an allocation of $102,500. And before I get a mover and seconded, you need to decide an option, so we'll just kind of do that orally. Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm just curious if we have a cost of what it might what our administration costs would be to administer this program, the Moffett Fund grant? Do you have an idea of what the cost is that we face to do this?
I had that same discussion with our clerk today. I don't know if you'd like to speak to that, Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, we have not calculated a total administrative cost. I know the newspaper ad alone is usually about probably between $2 to $3.50. We have placed radio ads in the past, but we have not calculated further administrative costs.
I will add that there is a lot of administration time goes into this in preparing reports. Councilor Bean, follow up?
Yes, follow up then. Well, in that case, I think I would be good with option C because I recognize that we do have some costs associated with this, but I want to make sure that as much money as possible is awarded to all the deserving organizations doing such good work in our community. So if we are going to go that route, I would recommend, or I would be in favor of option C rather than option A. Okay, thank you.
Any other councilors want to weigh in? Councilor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Bean. It does cost us money to give away money. And I think that we need to recoup some of our costs. Our budgets are tight. And I think that the recommendation from administration has been option C. And I support that.
I'm seeing nods around the table. Yeah, I agree with Councilor Bean, both in his selection of council item C and his explanation. I mean, you like to see as much money as possible go into the pocket of needy organizations, but the town of Fort Frances is rapidly becoming a needy organization as well, and we do have to look at our budget. So the recommendation then is that council receive report AR 24-0729 outlining the 2025 Moffett Family Fund with an allocation of $102,500, and further, we also have to do some other business. We need to appoint 2 members of the Moffett Family Fund Ad Hoc Committee. I think Councilor Mackey, you were on that last year, and Councilor McTaggart was on that last year. Would it be okay if we just invited those 2 if they're willing to come back? Are you willing to come back? Councilor McTaggart, are you willing to come back? He's saying yes. The gentleman did a stellar job last year. We'll keep giving you work. So, and further, the council appoint the following members to the Family Ad Hoc Committee. That's Councillor McTaggart and Councillor Mackey. And we're selecting option C. So I need a mover and seconder then. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Bean. Any further discussion on this? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried and no one is opposed. Item 9.2. Recommendation reads the council authorize the execution of an amending interim transfer agreement between the Attorney General and the town of Fort Frances under Part 3 and 9 of the Provincial Offences Act, POS, and further that a bylaw be brought to the next meeting of council. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Firth, Councillor Morrison. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? That's carried, and no one is opposed. Item 9.3, this is the POA agreement with the province. And the resolution reads that council approve the 2025 draft Provincial Offences Act budget to be finalized at the January 22, 2025 meeting of the POA municipal partners. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Mackey, Councillor Morrison. Any discussion on this one? Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the budget, I'm frustrated when I see that we have to spend upwards of $10,000 on collection fees. I guess through you, Your Worship, to the treasurer, could we get an indication of what the typical accounts receivable run at, and what's our What's our collection success percentage?
Madam Treasurer?
Through the chair, luckily I did have a heads up on this question, so I do have some answers. Our fines, so as most people may or may not know, they don't go away. Like, time doesn't relieve anybody of their POA fines. So sitting at December, there's outstanding fines in this district of $2.5 million, which are all sitting in the provincial offenses database. Over the 2007 to 2024 period, which is what I have record of for the collection agency, they have assisted us in collecting $1.2 million in fines. So that's 17 years, about $71,000 per year. We do add on the collection agency fee through the ICON system. So even though we're paying $10,000, it is up in our fines, costs, and fees revenue when it is collected.
Thank you for that. Councilor McTaggart, follow up?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. And just for clarification, are the fines that are outstanding attached to a person's driver's license for collection upon renewal?
Madam Treasurer?
So Caitlin advised Highway Traffic Act and Compulsory Auto Insurance Act fines are attached to your driver's license, and she can suspend licenses for non-payment of those fines. M&R has other rules with what they can do for, say, fishing licenses and whatnot.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Calling the question then, all in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Item 9.4 deals with the AMO conference. We want to get our registration in early and see if we can get a cheaper rate. And I believe that council decided they only wanted to send one counselor. So last year, I believe Councilor Bernetta went in my place. I was ill. Councilor Behan went. Councilor Mackey went last year. Would someone who didn't go last year, perhaps one of the new people, like to go to AMO? No? No? Sure. Okay. That's fine with council, that Councilor Firth goes? Okay, then, the recommendation that along with the Town of Fort Frances Chief Administrative Officer, the following members of Mayor and Council attend the AMO 2025 conference. Mayor Andrew Halikas and Councilor Caleb Firth. Any further discussion on this? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Councilor Behan, did we get a mover and seconder? You're my watchdog. So just on the off chance that we didn't, mover and seconder for this. Councilor Morrison, Councilor Bernetta. So they're the official mover and seconder. And again, just making it official, calling the question again, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, 9.5, before I put this on the floor, there's a change to the recommendation. The change to the recommendation is from the list of boards and committees that Councilor Morrison will be serving on, we will strike the Fort Frances Homelessness Committee, and we'll add on that recommendation and further that Mayor Halikas will sit on the Homelessness Committee. That's something I've been sitting on since its inception. So if it's okay with council, I'll just keep doing that. So the recommendation then would read that council appoint Councilor Bill Morrison to the following boards and committees: the Indigenous Relations Advisory Committee, the Fort Francis Public Library Board, the Citizen of the Year Committee, the Physician Recruitment and Retention Committee, and further, that Mayor Halakis will sit on the Homelessness Committee. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Firth, Councillor Mackey. Any discussion on this? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. Congratulations, Councillor Morrison. You now have some work to do. There are no Community Service Division reports. There's no Planning and Development Division reports. We do have one Operation Facility Division reports, and I'll put a resolution on the floor. The resolution is that Council approval report AR-25-0733 will agree with the recommendation of administration to develop a cost for accepting international waste at the Fort Francis landfill site. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Behan, Councillor Burdana. Discussion? Councillor Mackey, and then Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my initial question is, how quickly is our landfill going to come to an end if we partake in taking the Americans' garbage? It's going to shorten the lifespan, obviously.
I guess that's for you, Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So right now our landfill site has about 10 years of capacity left in it. We've been actively working towards doing something with that site for the last number of years. It is not something that happens overnight. It takes time. Kind of the latest direction that we've been heading is to do a small, quote unquote small, expansion at our current site, which will buy us another about 10 years at our current site under current collection totals, while we further furnish out whether we are going to build on to the site we have or look to a whole new site. One of the early things that our consultants did through this was reach out to communities, including Couchiching County, seeing if there or what was out there for interest in bringing their waste to our landfill site to help kind of guide us down the path of what our next steps are. So all that being said, right now under kind of current loading, we're looking at about 10 years. So we would be basically just shy of doubling the waste brought in. So that would look to roughly cut it in half.
Follow up.
So your study is going to come back with what kind of revenue we're looking at, or do you have some kind of idea at present? And how much does a new landfill cost?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So first and foremost, a new landfill is happening whether we accept additional waste or not. That's just the reality. What we want to do, pending some direction from council, is to figure out what it's going to cost us to accept this waste. There is some additional processing that has to happen with it, and there's of course a cost for that. Operating a landfill site, there's a cost to that as well. That cost doesn't go up for every ton that you get equally. So if we can get more tons in, the cost only goes up a little bit. So then we can see more revenue come from it that'll help us offset our future expansion and then future increase in operating costs with that. So what we're really hoping to do is figure out what sort of costs, what our baseline costs are to accept this waste, and then from there evaluate what sort of revenue we can build into those costs for that tipping fee to support going forward with accepting this, or potentially accepting this waste.
Thank you, Manager Rob. Any further questions? I have Councillor McTaggart, and then I'll go to Councillor Burnetta. Go ahead, Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Rob, and I'm sort of following up on Councillor Mackey's questioning. I think this is an interesting concept, and I know that we've been approached by an area First Nation to have landfill use, and I believe we're taking in from a small unorganized area east of town. But as we look to possibly expand to be a regional a dump site, I'm hoping that we are able to, with work on the consultants, to look for a longer term solution, longer than an additional 10 years, something that's going to get us out 30 or 40 years so that we can do some significant planning. And my question then is that part of the scope of the work that is being done currently?
Manager Rob?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, absolutely. The reality of it is we have limited opportunity to expand in our current site, not due to lack of available land or anything like that. It's really contained within the regulations that we have to operate the landfill site within. So, the reality of it is that even if we do an expansion, we're now 20 years away from having to have a brand new landfill site, which in the scheme of how long it takes to create a new landfill site is like tomorrow. So, the reality of it is we are heading down the path of a new site that it's going to have that 30, 40 year life cycle. And the more agencies like this that are coming and asking to utilize that will help us design that site for the total waste that we're anticipating having. Not just the town of Fort Frances. We design it for just the town of Fort Frances current waste, and then we have other people coming to the table. Right, that life is going to shrink. So we want to have all of these interested parties at the table early, saying, yes, we might be interested down the road, so we can design and build for that as we work through this process.
Thank you, Manager Rob. Councillor McKay, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bernetta?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification of the motion before us tonight is to say to you, yes, go ahead and do the costing. So it's not saying, yes, we're going to be accepting this garbage, right?
Through the chair, that's correct. So Couchiching County hasn't just come to us and said, hey town, will you take our waste? They are approaching the end of their current agreement with their current provider, and they are looking at all options. If we go through this exercise, there's nothing to say that we are any cheaper than what they're currently doing because of, it's a much shorter transportation than what they're doing, but there's a bridge crossing involved in it. There's different regulations being in a different country. So really, I just wanted to get, some direction from council that yes, we're interested in participating in this, go through the exercise of figuring out what this is going to cost so that we can advise Couchiching County of that.
Follow up?
Thank you. That was actually my other question was, are we aware of the regulations for accepting international garbage? I'm just thinking there must be huge red tape in terms of that. People could smuggle all kinds of things in the garbage.
It does have to be handled in a special way, but there isn't. It's not as daunting red tape as one might expect. Like I said, there are very specific ways that we have to handle the waste, and with that, of course, is going to come a cost from our operators. So, before we get into going down the path with them and figuring out what the costs are, we want to make sure that there's some interest around this table for that.
Thank you.
I do know that the reverse happens, that the City of Toronto trucks some of their waste to Detroit. So we probably look at that. Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to maybe Manager Rob. I'm all in favor of finding new ways to generate revenue. If this is the way to do that, that's wonderful. And maybe Fort Frances becomes a regional hub for a lot of things. And so in that respect, I think that's a great idea. I guess my one question sort of builds off what Councillor Bernetta talked about. Would they have things they put in their waste that we can't put in our waste because of different regulations? I'm thinking hazardous waste, things like that. And how would you differentiate between waste that they can accept in their landfills, but waste we can't accept in our landfills? I'm just curious how that would work. Thank you.
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. It's actually a great question. And interestingly enough, because Couchiching County doesn't have a landfill site, they have a transfer station. So all the waste that comes to their transfer station is sorted before it's loaded and hauled. So because of the way that they do their operations, we probably would see better diversion coming from their waste than we are getting in our waste here locally. In terms of recyclables, hazardous waste, steel, things like that that are recyclable, easily recyclable end products.
Further questions? Councillor Mackey?
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps this question is for another conversation, but utilizing all that garbage to generate electricity, burning it, doing something other than just piling it up. Is there something, have you looked at it, or will you be looking into some other viable options?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. That is a long conversation, but the short answer to it is right now I'm looking at actually 2 different technologies that we could utilize at our current site for doing green things with solid waste. So yes is the short answer.
Councillor Morrison.
To the chair, thanks, Manager Rob. And he's right. They do a lot of sorting across there. I have some familiarity with the garbage system over there, and it's a lot cleaner than what we're doing over here. Like, they really sort everything because of the transfer. I'm just wondering if there's any kind of estimated how much revenue it could generate. Do you know what their contracts are, or approximate with other where they're delivering it now?
Manager Rob.
Thank you. I don't necessarily have a number for you right now. I know roughly what their historical tonnage has been, and I know what their tipping fees are. The big difference is the transportation. I don't know what they pay for transportation, but I do know that they transport their material over 100 miles one way to a landfill site. So there's many components to all of this before Couchiching is going to be able to figure out where their most economical landfill location is. So really what I want to do is figure out how much it's going to cost us, and then proceed from there.
Those are all excellent questions, councillors. And Bill Surratt, you have a follow-up.
Yeah, one thing, I have a friend who family owns a garbage dump. Actually, the Irwindale Speedway's on top of it right now, and I know it's almost like they have a lot of revenue because people always have to get rid of their garbage. And I think with the Americans, that they're saving 100 miles, and the exchange rate the way it is, I mean, it might look beneficial to them and a good revenue source for us, and it'll look something they're always going to need. Thanks.
Yep, good point. Yes, good questions. You asked all the questions that I had. I think it's an interesting concept, and right now the best thing that we can do is get some information. So I'm definitely in favor of getting a report on this. If there's no further discussion, then I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. It is. I was ready for you. That brings us to item number 13, which are bylaws. And recommendation reads that the following bylaws be introduced and read and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and sealed with a corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Bylaw 01-25 being a bylaw to authorize the temporary borrowing for 2025. Bylaw 02-25 being a bylaw to provide for an interim tax levy in the year 2025. Bylaw 03-25 being a bylaw to authorize a letter of understanding with the Township of Alberton regarding bylaw enforcement services. Bylaw 03-14 AG being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 03-14 as amended, 1231 Kings Highway. And bylaw 04-25, adopt an official plan and to repeal bylaw number 63-11. Need a mover and seconder. Councillor Firth? Councillor Behan? Any discussion on these? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Okay, that brings us to item number 14, which is notice of motion or motion to reconsider. There are none. Item 15 is the closed session. And I will put a bylaw or a resolution on the floor right now that council now meet in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 15.2, interest in purchasing municipal lot for industrial development update. That comes under 239-C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. I need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Brunetta, Councillor Morrison. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. So we are moving in camera at 6:49. 6:49. Okay. We're back. Council discussed the interest in purchasing a municipal lot, and they will proceed as directed. I also have a resolution coming out of the closed session. The recommendation reads that council approve the closed meeting minutes of December 9th, 2024 as presented. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Behan, Councillor Firth. Any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. We now have our confirmatory bylaw. Recommendation reads that bylaw 05-25, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Fort Francis, be introduced and read and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Brunetta, Councillor Firth. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. No one is opposed. And finally, that having reached the hour of 7:08, this meeting of the Town of Fort Francis be now closed. Moved by Councillor McTaggart, seconded by Councillor Mackey. All in favor? That's carried.
Good night, everyone.